Welcome to the Extinction Level Event Podcast, Apocalypse Edition. I am your host, the Barrelman. Now, just an update for anybody wondering, these are probably all going to get moved up in the schedule for release, and the modern trailers I'm just going to pepper in later, because the way the system's set up, I got to totally redo everything for a different setup just to do those, and then, physically in the room, not just on the computer and stuff like that. So I'll get to those. It's just the schedule's going to get all messed up a little bit. Like I said, it's just an update just in case anybody was paying attention to what I was saying. If not, don't worry about it. It does mean these will come out a little bit sooner. Some people might like that. Some people might hate it. Some people might like to hate it. However you're consuming your media, you go, man. You go. Or girl. Don't mean to be gender biased on that one. We have got a lot to get through. I don't know how much time it will take just to get through the stuff I have on my notes, let alone any other sort of off the cuff, down the rabbit hole topics we have. But so we got, so obviously this, well, I'm thinking just because of the new release date, Trump may or may not be president at the time. He's president-elect, but he's not in office yet. He may or may not be in office. But this is getting recorded at the end of November, so at this point he isn't, but we know that he wants to, or is saying that he's going to put RFK in charge of Health and Human Services right now. So the first part of this is just based on him being that. And I know a lot of people, again, are like, I thought this wasn't a political thing. It isn't a political thing, but the apocalypse takes many forms, and one of those forms is what we're gonna talk about here. And it is imperative to what we're talking about that RFK is going to be in charge of Health and Human Services. And again, this is I did a more concentrated version of this topic in the before times of the podcast. I know I say that a lot, but the point is they're out there. They're somewhere. If you search Extinction Level Event Podcast, if you're at all curious, and I'm saying you should do that or that you need to. I'm just saying those are out there. So I like to point out that I have done the topic. So I've done some research and stuff on it, but we will get to it later, for sure. Right now, there's a lot happening. A lot of things I just throw in the notes, and at this point, the notes are just like really full. And I'm like, I just need to do a podcast on all this stuff and not concentrate on like a specific topic necessarily just because of all the stuff we have to get to. So again, we're going back to the RFK stuff, being in charge of Health and Human Services and tying that into a possible apocalypse. And again, I want to reiterate, this is not a conspiracy theory show. We're not talking about I think the deep state this, or, aliens or the Jewish cabal or some weird, stupid crap like that. We're talking about actual facts that are happening, extrapolating from the past to show us the future, because that's how prediction works, right? In a scientific way, that's how prediction works, as opposed to a psychic way. Like, there's definitely always guesswork. There's always, we don't know for sure. But the closest you can get to an actual predictive model, that's what we try to work with here. That's what most scientists try to work with, is a predictive model that has... Anyways, so RFK. So what's the big deal? Who cares? Just another goon in charge of Health and Human Services. It's not really going to be a whole lot different than before, right? Well, that's not really true. And the reason that's not really true is because this administration has boasted that it is going to be unlike any other administration. They plan on seizing all of the power. They plan on corrupting all of the system. They plan on twisting and warping laws, regulations, and ordinances to their favor, to be whatever they want it to be, so they can do whatever they want to do. And it is under those circumstances that these things are exacerbated. right? So again, we're not talking about this on the political stage as a political discussion, even though that's obviously part of it. We're talking about that because I want you to understand the scope and power that RFK will have, as opposed to maybe ones in the power, like, well, so-and-so was bad and he didn't. Yeah, the regulations and the checks and balances were still mostly, right? Not 100%. We chipped away at them a little bit, years and decades gone by, right? But still, for the most part, it was still there. It was in place, whether it was 100% effective or not. In this particular case, we're talking about eliminating all of that and basically giving him free reign, or as much free reign as he can get, depending on what roadblocks he may run into and whether they can get rid of those roadblocks for him or not, right? So this is, again, like I like to do, kind of worst case scenario, because again, expect the worst, prepare for the worst, and hope for the best. There we go. I lost it there for a minute. All the negative nihilism just rattling around and stuck in my brain. Sorry. Yes, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Yes, so again, we want to prepare for the worst. We want to talk about the worst because we want to know how far that can get. And especially if there's anything we can do about it, which in this case, there isn't a ton, but that doesn't mean we can't personally prepare for the situation, which is why knowing what the worst is a good thing. If you know World War II is coming, World War III, World War II, you know that's coming. That's pretty terrible as well, depending on where you are, right? But if you know World War III is coming, maybe you can get yourself a, bunker underground far enough to survive that kind of thing. Like, there are ways to try to prepare for these things. But if we don't know that it's coming, then everybody's just wiped out, right? Other than the elites, because they have whatever they want whenever they need it. They've always been prepared for everything. They're kind of paranoid that way, and rightfully so, because they're the monster makers in the tower, right? And we're all the people with the pitchforks and torches, and they're afraid that we're going to come and burn their house down, even though their house is made of stone. Not that stopped them in the acolyte, but you know what I mean, or you don't, but it's irrelevant. The point is, they're probably not really going to be able to do much, but they don't really want the bother, you know what I mean? So they're prepared for a lot of things because of their paranoia, because of the positions they're in, and the fact that, well, they should be, because they're horrible people who do horrible things, and karma says they have horrible things coming to them, right? If you believe in that kind of thing. And a lot of people still do. Well, my dog's on the way. He gets the rest of the coffee cup. There's only a little bit in there, but he likes to play with it. And then drink the little teeny bit of coffee that's on the bottom. I'm sure somebody's gonna complain that it's not good for him, but he doesn't get like a huge dose of it. He gets like a little teeny bit in the corner that I didn't finish off because I couldn't suck it all out of the cup. I'm sure there was a better way to put that, but you know what I mean. So, back to the topic at hand. RFK, Head of Health and Human Services. So this is a man who went down to Samoa, right? The Samoan something. It's Samoa something now, but it was Samoa, and this was, I can't even remember who it was. I know Sarah Palin was like the big conduit, but I can't remember the actual person who was, their child got autism because they took a virus, which is not how that works. Anybody who knows what autism is and how viruses work know that those two don't even play in the same ball field. They're like, yeah, those is your body. Yes, you're 100% correct, but your body is not one thing. Your body is a huge collection of microsystems, and those microsystems are mostly tangentially associated with each other. And some of them so far removed that they really have nothing to do with each other in any kind of direct capacity where one would just directly affect the other, aka get a vaccine, get autism. So the fact is, forget whether you even believe it or not, and if you have a scientific mind at all, you shouldn't, but forget whether you do or not. The point is, that is the environment which RFK started being like, I am now an important voice in the critique of health and other stuff. Like, he was kind of on the right path with, hey, we need to eat healthier, and they're putting a bunch of crap in our food that they shouldn't. And there's a lot of research saying that companies are purposely making food addictive because obviously you're addicted to it. You're going to keep buying it, and they're going to make money, right? That's the whole point of a corporation. Something that we will actually talk more about in a discussion, so not an episode, because it will be a little bit more political and economics and all that kind of stuff. And we will talk about that in the discussion, but it's not going to be part of the podcast because the podcast has a very specific focus, even if it has a very broad range of topics for it. But yeah, so he was right in some of this stuff, but then he started believing some of the wackier things, like, you know, the vaccine will give you autism. And apparently there was a point where 2 kids were given the vaccine and they died. Now, the problem is that we know for a fact that what happened is that the vaccine isn't simply given straight, if you will. It's mixed in a solution. That solution is supposed to be, I believe, sterile water. It was supposed to be the solution. Or it could have been a saline water. I'm actually not sure about that. What I do know is it's not supposed to be muscle relaxer. And if you are given muscle relaxer, it's sure as heck not supposed to be on the level that you would get in the vaccine, right? This is just way, way too much. Well, a nurse mixed them up and admitted to it. She's like, that's my bad. This is what I did. I'm sorry. It was a mistake, but this is what caused them their life. She had put muscle relaxer in and mixed it into the vaccine, gave that to them, and the muscle relaxer killed these 2 kids, not the vaccine that had been given to a ton of other kids at this point. This wasn't like we were starting out and 2 kids just died. Oh my gosh, put the vaccine away. No, vaccine's been going. Like, it's been fine, and then 2 kids died. So this is an aberration. So the scientific mind thinks, okay, something was different about this than the other things. Now, it can 100% be these kids died because of the vaccine. That is a possibility, right? And some people are allergic and have reactions to things that could be fatal. It 100% could. So could driving in your car, so could breathing, so could, unknown fissure open up under your house that has a toxic gas that's undetectable, and you drop dead in your living room without ever knowing it was there. You don't smell it, you don't see it, and then you're dead like 10 seconds later. That can happen. Are you going to stop breathing? Are you going to stop being on planet Earth? No. So you can't say, well, I'll never take a vaccine because I could die. Because going to the vaccine is probably more likely to kill you, or coming home from it, than taking the vaccine. The fact is, the vaccine is way more effective than it is fatal to anybody, right? The percentage is minuscule, but it's entirely possible, is the point. But they looked into it and found out, no, this was not the vaccine. This was what they mixed the vaccine with. And they're like, well, it was still the vaccine though, right? It's like, no, that's like me saying, hey, would you like some orange juice? And everybody in the party gets orange juice. And then I say, hey, Bob, we got a couple of special guests here. We're running out. We still got some concentrate. Can you whip up a couple glasses? And Jerry goes and whips up a couple of glasses. But I've had like a rat problem or something, right? And there's a bottle in there of cyanide that I've been using to poison rodents or rats or whatever, rats are rodents, but you know what I mean. And he pours the cyanide in thinking that that's maybe seltzer water or something that he could put in to the orange juice. And these 2 people died. And then coming back later and saying, well, orange juice killed these people. It's like, technically, drinking the orange juice is why they died, 100%. But the orange juice didn't kill them. It was the cyanide inside the orange juice that killed them. You can't blame the orange juice for the cyanide. Just because it happened to be part of the delivery system, you don't just get to say, well, now orange juice kills people. It was not the orange juice. It was the cyanide. It was not the vaccines. It was the muscle relaxer they mixed with it. That killed these people. Like, it's a matter of record that he distorted the facts and changed the facts and lied about this. Like, it is on record that he did this. This isn't an if, or maybe he just looked at it, no. Or that he made a mistake. He literally changed the facts and altered things so that it looked like the vaccine did it. And the fact is, everybody there who was taking the measles vaccine, and they had a really, really low rate of measles, despite the fact that they didn't have the most robust Medicare or medical apparatus, infrastructure there. And yet, once he went through with these lies, like, the people started dropping these, vaccines like flies. And the next thing you know, the measles epidemic, something that was almost wiped out off the face of this planet, almost wiped out, was almost gone. And it came back, with a vengeance, right? 83 people, mostly kids and the elderly, but mostly kids, died. People lost their children. Their sons and daughters died because of this lie, because of this distortion. So what we're looking at here is the Captain Tripp scenario, right? It's a little bit further down in my notes because I thought about it later, but it's basically a Captain Tripp scenario, right? A deadly vaccine wiping out a bunch of people, another pandemic, right? Makes COVID look like a morning cough. And that's just the measles. That's just the measles. There are way, way worse things than the measles. I think the worst thing was, a lot of people are going to say bubonic plague. It wasn't, actually. I think it was like the Spanish flu of 1817 or I can't remember when it was, but it was a Spanish flu. It was like a couple hundred years ago. And the estimates are somewhere between like 40 to like 90% of the human population died from this stuff. It was just insane. It wiped out a ton of people. Like, it put everything else to shame. Like, you got things like hemorrhagic fever, which makes you bleed all over the place, and that's horrifying. But it does not have the fatality numbers that the Spanish flu has. The numbers alone are just breathtaking on that. So let's look at this on a grander scale now, because now we're talking about the United States, not Samoa. So if he all of a sudden repeals all these vaccine mandates and says, you don't have to have these vaccines anymore. You can if you want, although even that's questionable whether they'll even give us a choice, because Republicans aren't known for being the pro-choice people, right? Of anything, not just abortion rights, but just anything. They're not really pro-choice. You do what we say because we know better than you do, and God tells us what's better for you anyways. So on a countrywide scale, what we're looking at is COVID, right? The whole, we got to stay indoors, locked down, and can't come out because we're going to get infected, and we're going to give everybody our infection and all that, and everybody's going to die. But like times 100. And you're like, whoa, well, COVID was pretty intense, man. You can't do times 100. That's not even a thing. It's like, you think that it's not a thing. But trust me when I say it definitely can be a thing. I tell you what, why don't anybody who has it, there's a movie and a miniseries, kind of any of them, but especially the one of the miniseries. I don't think there's one. I think there's just a couple of miniseries of Stephen King's The Stand, right? So watch The Stand. Just like the first third or the first episode or two, right, in the miniseries, whatever it is, just get through the disease part. Look at the dystopian landscape that it creates. You can even look at like the first few episodes, maybe even the first season, although I think that gets a little too zombie-ish, of The Walking Dead. But at least the first episode, I believe, really paints a picture of the dystopian kind of atmosphere that you get with something like this, right? What we're looking at. We're not looking at supply chain problems. We're looking at a complete shutdown of any kind of distribution system. Food, power, water, anything like that gets shut down because everybody's afraid to come out or be dead, right? This is like panic inducing, and we can't get help from other places, Europe, Asia places, because they're all scared crapless. They don't want anything to do with us and what we're doing. It's going to affect the entire world because there's no choice except for this getting out. It is going to get out. It's going to infect them all. But they are all on severe, keep these Americans out of here lockdown, because it is going to scare the hell out of everybody, right? Now, that's one problem, right? The other problem is when you get to this point of all of these deadly diseases, a disease evolves like anything else, right? It constantly gets changed and mutated. I mean, that's how evolution, quote unquote, works, right? I say quote unquote not because I don't believe in evolution. I say it because it's not always evolution. Sometimes it's just change, because that's really what evolution is change, adaptation that advances through the ages, that makes us so that we can survive better. But not all mutation ends that way. Some mutations end in you having a third arm that is more of a hindrance, and it just happened. Didn't ask your permission, right? It doesn't necessarily do you any better, but it's a mutation that happens. If it does do you better, and if you're more successful, sometimes you could pass that on. Now everybody has third arms, right? Or a lot of people do. So the mutation is just the vehicle for evolution. But with diseases, you get so much mutation that evolution is just inevitable. So what we're getting is now that same disease is more dangerous. It can be, it overcomes any defenses that we naturally have. It becomes immune to any weapons that we have against it. It then becomes more virulent. It becomes airborne all of a sudden, like all these evolutions that these diseases have, right? And what is the, let's see how I say it. Where is it that you can find the greatest ecosystem for this to happen, right? Well, it is somebody who is infected the longest. They don't have to have the strongest infection. They don't have to have the worst, variety. They just have to have it alive in their body and evolving and mutating long enough. The longer it exists within them, even in a weakened form, the more it's going to go through these mutations and have a greater chance of becoming more powerful, if you will, right? So for some diseases, they exist due to decaying carrion, right? So you have a dead body, you can get diseases off that dead. It doesn't just have to be off a living person. Diseases will grow on dead bodies, right? Some of the worst ones will be on a dead body, which is why you don't want to eat like raw chicken. I mean, the chicken's dead, right? The chicken, the pork, it's all dead. But we don't want the diseases from it, because they will go inside of our living bodies, right? And they will cause havoc. Diseases, bacteria, all that kind of stuff, right? Not just viruses, bacteria as well. All of that can be exacerbated by having a dead, rotting body around. Now imagine, let's say a conservative 30% of the population is dead within 2 months. There's no way everybody's getting buried. There isn't enough plots on the planet to put everybody, at least at that moment, right? There are dead bodies in places we don't even know. Your neighbors could have been dead for a month. Have you gone to check on them? Maybe you hate your neighbors. Maybe you never talk to them. Maybe the more quiet they are, the more happy you are, because maybe they're not banging the hammer every Sunday now. Maybe you're like, oh, well, I guess they're just afraid like everybody else, so they're keeping quiet. No, they've been dead and rotting for over a month. That's a disease vector that can then get passed on to you, could get passed on to animals and passed on to you. Like you might think, well, I just don't ever go and look there, so it's okay. No, it doesn't matter. The fact that it's happening means that these viruses and bacteria are evolving to become even deadlier. And trust me, they will find their way to you. And it is not going to be good. What we're going to end up with when he starts pulling out these regulations and when we start defunding scientific research, because who could do that when we need to give billionaires another tax break, right? We're going to enter a new dark ages, where the dark ages don't exist because we simply didn't learn a whole bunch of stuff or we were kind of, on the wrong path. The reason we have the dark ages is because of religion. Religion took over. It became the priority rather than scientific innovation. Now, I'm not saying that you have to get rid of religion. You can't have it. That would be my personal preference, but I'm not here to make you have my personal preference. You have the freedom to have your own preference, and I'm perfectly fine with that. What I am saying, though, is that when religion takes over and dominates and becomes the priority over scientific innovation, then scientific innovation flounders, and sometimes we even go backwards, getting rid of some of our advances because they're like witchcraft and who knows what kind of conspiracy this is attached to. So we're not going to listen to or believe that. The Bible's the only defense you need. Got a cold, the Bible's the only defense. Pray to God. You got, hemorrhagic fever, read your Bible harder. And we start getting into a place where our scientific advancements devolve, and we start getting into a point where we basically go backwards societally, right? And that is when you get the Dark Ages, which is why we had the Dark Ages. Well, we're looking at the Dark Ages, where it is more important to read your Bible than it is to be able to read a genomic chart. So that's, something fun to look forward to. So we should have, if we're going to talk about vaccine at all, a basic understanding of how this works, right? Especially with the newer vaccines. Especially with, say, the COVID. Some vaccines are always going to be one way, some vaccines another. There's lots of different ways to get these vaccines, right? But the biggest one with the COVID, and the one that came out that basically everybody was getting, is an mRNA, right? A messenger RNA version of a vaccine. So to understand what that is, let's go through a basic, right? We won't belabor the point because I did that in another, long ago podcast. We'll do it again later, right? We'll get into this when we make an episode about it. But I just really want to go through the basics to give you an understanding. So the way the body works is when you're injured or anything like that, your body basically runs off of proteins. But different proteins do different things. So when your body needs to heal, your body creates specific proteins that are made to either heal you or trigger things that will heal you, or enhance things that are already trying to heal you. So the proteins are the important thing. Your body lives based on which proteins are being created and when. So if that gets disrupted or destroyed, then your body will not function. You will die. You will fail to heal. You'll fail to create more red blood cells. You just named the part of your body that will just cease functioning, or at least cease functioning correctly, and not having the proper proteins created in your body will do that. So then the question is, how are proteins, how does the body decide to create? The decisions are a lot more chemical. It's not really a brain inside your brain going, oh, we need this and we need that. It's a reactionary thing. But where do these proteins ultimately come from? Because, they do come from our food. We definitely get proteins that way. But those are absorbed and used proteins. These are proteins specifically tailored and designed for you personally. Right? It's how your body functions, not just how the body functions. And that comes from your DNA, your diribonucleic acid, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And it is, we've all probably seen the double helix, right? And you got the two little stair steps, right? They meet together to make one longer stair step, but there are two of them, and they meet and they form this chain, right? Like a zipper, like a double helix zipper. Well, what happens is you take a part of that DNA, right? And it comes off. You take the double helix, make it a single helix, or at least a part of it, with a certain bits of those ladders, right? Whether it's 2 bits, 1 bit, whatever it is, there's certain bits of the ladder that come with that one chunk of helix. It is small enough to then exit the nucleus of your cell, and it is essentially the end of a key. So you think of the key and you think of the little, I can't even remember what it's called, but the little notches in the key. I know it's got a name, but you look at the little notches there, and there's like the big ones, the small ones. Sometimes there's 2 small ones. It's different. That's how keys work, right? That's how it knows to unlock this door, not that door. How that one won't open your front door, but it'll open the garage. That's based on these little indentations in there, these little notches. Well, that's how your DNA functions. And what happens is the basic chemicals and building blocks in your body from things like eating or breathing will then bind with the key, forming a sort of other side of the key, right? I don't want to say an exact mirror of the key necessarily, but it attaches in a way that the end result is the protein you need. So this little piece, this RNA, right, this ribonucleic acid, breaks off and comes out of the nucleus, and it is the engine that creates the proteins that do what your body needs it to do, right? Each time a protein needs to be created, this is how it's happened, every single time, without fail. That's how this works, right? And you get mRNA, which is the messenger RNA, and I would have to look at my notes to really remember the difference between RNA and mRNA. I believe one of the differences is there's a letter that's different in the mRNA than the RNA, but essentially it is still one of those little snippets that creates these proteins in your body that help it function. So what the vaccine did was it introduced an existing little snippet of mRNA to your body to tell it this is what the proteins you need to create to fight COVID-19, right? The vaccine did not fight COVID-19. The vaccine instructed your body how to defeat COVID-19, right? Which is one of the reasons why the vaccine could be really, really great, or it could be weak, or whatever. Like, it's going to help you, but what's the extent? How quickly are you going to heal and recover? That's because it's still your body doing it. The vaccine just instructs your body how, right? It gives you the battle plans and whatever metaphors you want. So that's what the mRNA vaccines do, is they give your body the instruction, just like your DNA normally would, right? Your DNA does give you instruction. Your body does remember diseases, and it does remember how to create those proteins specifically, which is why once you've got a disease, usually you have either an immunity or a resistance to it. Doesn't always work that way. It's a little bit like the difference between solid state memory and RAM, right? When the power goes off, the RAM clears, but the solid state memory will stay, right? The hard drive versus, the RAM memory. So your body can work a little like that, and sometimes you have a RAM version and it's not going to remember, and you're just going to get sick again. And sometimes you have the solid state, hard drive version. It's like, yeah, it remembers every time. But sometimes even the diseases change and will adapt. So, it's this constant battle. But essentially that's what the vaccine does, is it replicates a normal part of your body that's already happening, right? You didn't create something new or do something different. And it just taught your body a specific thing that your body already does, just not necessarily that exact way. right? It's like you get the key for your car in the garage. You're almost exactly the same, but that one notch is different. Like just sometimes you can even wiggle it and get one to work in the other, right? Sometimes you can do that, but it's not really made for that. There is a little bit of difference, but the key knows the difference because it's built different, and the lock knows the difference, right? So that's the whole point, is it creates that little bit of difference that your body didn't necessarily know ahead of time. It might not learn in enough time to save you. Well, now it does, right? And that's essentially RNA and how that worked. And it worked on the delivery system for the virus, and that was those little spiky things, right? The little spiky things that kept showing us, those are basically the delivery keys, and they worked a little bit like mRNA themselves, where they would unlock your cells for itself to infect, right? That's what the little spikes do. They're essentially like little skeleton keys for them to get into your cells and infect and destroy them. And we were basically giving the keys to your body to say, yeah, don't accept those keys. Yeah, that's bad. Yeah, that's a burglar trying to get in. Yeah, no bueno, right? All right, so we're now moving on to the second part here, or the second main part, I should say, which is we finally got some word from the COP29 conference that they had, right? Again, I don't know what COP stands for. I did not look it up. I honestly kind of lost track of it until I saw a report the other day. I can't remember who it was. It was one of the main media news stations, like an ABC, NBC, MSN, something like that. I don't think it was MSN. Not that I personally have anything against them. I don't really care. If it's a good report and it's factual, then I don't care who's giving it to me, as long as it is factual. And but I think it was like ABC, because I just tend to watch them a lot. They just come up a lot for things I'm interested in, not specifically because I'm brand loyal or anything. So the conference ended apparently, and the gist is we're effed, right? That's kind of the gist of the COP29, which is apparently a conference. I think it's international, but I don't know. I don't even remember where it was. It seemed like it was in Brazil or Argentina or something, but I don't remember. I didn't get enough of that information. What I did get was, we had talked about this in a previous podcast a little bit, but I got some more clarification thanks to this news report, right? So they were talking about the 1.5 degrees Celsius and when we were going to get to that. And I had assumed that they were talking about the year 2100, because that's a big goal for a lot of these forecasts, right? They're saying the year 2100, this is what it's going to get to. That's like our bar. The end of the century, we're trying to keep it from doing this, or we're trying to keep it from doing that. So that was my natural assumption as what was going on. But it turns out, no. We're talking about a month. Basically, we're talking about 20 years from now. 20 years from now. Not the end of the century, in 20 years. They're saying that even though way back in the day they were saying we don't want to get to 1.5, and they were talking about that at the end of the century, we are already at, right now, if we stopped everything, we're still already at it, 1.3. We're already there, right? And they were talking about 1.5 at the end of the century, like I said, way back in the day. And now we're already at 1.3. And they're saying we want to keep it to 1.5, but we're looking at that in 20 years. 20 years we want to keep it to 1.5, right? But they're saying if things don't really improve, if we can't get some of these improvements to go through, we're looking at that in the next 15 years instead, right? And again, these are very simple models. There's a lot of complexity to there. I don't want to make it sound like they've got like 3 variables on a piece of paper and that's it. But they got complex models. but their complex models are still modeling very simple things, right? They're just modeling carbon emissions. They're just modeling the carbon in the atmosphere and how much it is and what effect it's, you know what I mean? There's so many other little things that are contributing that they're not modeling that make this worse, right? And they're trying to model for everything they can. They're not trying to be simple, right? But they just end up not doing all of it, some of which is because we don't have a supercomputer big enough in the world, unless somebody comes up with a Jupiter brain tomorrow, right? And in which case, maybe all our problems are over anyways, one way or the other, right? So I was thinking, we were talking about the end of the century, but this is way worse than even I thought. Not worse than I thought was going to happen, but worse than I thought they were talking about, right? I thought they were talking about end of the century. They're talking about 20 years, and now they're talking about maybe 15 years to 1.5. And if this is going the way some people are saying, which is more exponential than just linear, we're looking at, what, another 10, 15 years, if we're being generous, before we hit 2, right? If it keeps going at this rate. Hopefully not. Maybe it's 30 years and then we hit 2. That's still way too soon. Way too soon to hit 2.0, right? And that was the tipping point way back in the day. 2.0 was it. We hit 2.0, we're done. We're cooked. We're Gonzville, right? Now, they've been changing a lot of that lately, and a lot of that, I think, is the whole, like I say, there's got to be a word for this. I don't know what it is, but the scenario where the asteroids come in, they just don't tell us so that nobody panics and you just keep going about your day because what can you do about it anyways, right? I still think a lot of it is that sort of thing, right? Where they're just trying to, they know the end is like on its way, but they're trying not to have everybody panic again about it and try to give you some hope, right? I don't know really a whole lot to say about that other than that, right? Now, this same report was talking about a new substance that this, I want to say kid, he's in college, I think he's a graduate or a what do they call it? Not a pre-graduate. I don't think it's a postgrad. He could be a postgrad, but it seems like maybe somebody who's working on their degree still. But they're working on a lab in UC Berkeley, right? And they are creating a material called a covalent organic framework. Well, this is what the report said. I'm sure it has a fancier, more scientific name. Maybe it's named for the substances within the substance. Maybe it's got a code name. I don't know. It is a covalent organic framework, though, is a family of materials, right? It is like zeolites. Zeolites are used now, especially artificially created ones, for filters in a lot of things. Like, heaters, coolers, air conditioners, whatever. Zeolites are excellent filters. I think they use them even in water, like to filter out saline and stuff like that, right? Zeolites are just excellent little filters. And what they are is crystalline structures, right? They're like little tubes. And these tubes are obviously together. They're a little bit like a honeycomb, right? Not necessarily hexagonal like that, but their crystalline structures are connected in that sort of framework. And they got little tubes. And those tubes are a specific size, which means certain things can go in and certain things are too big. And when you get small enough, the sorts of things that can come in and out can be as small as single atoms, and even some atoms that are just too big to go in there, right? So that's what we're talking about, is these covalent organic frameworks are a little bit like a zeolite in that they are they're a framework, right, of these tubules, these crystalline tubules. Apparently, growing them is extraordinarily difficult to make any kind of filter, as you or I may know, would be like a slab filter, right? Just a sheet of material, and then you pass things through. So these end up being powders. And apparently this powder and usually a filter works as you pass something through it and it's clean on the other side, right? Apparently the way these powders work, or the way that it was kind of explained, is that the air goes through and the carbon dioxide gets trapped within the pores. So it's not as much things go through in our clean, although that does end up happening, is that you would put a dirty carbon dioxide filled air in, and this absorbs all the carbon dioxide essentially, or traps it all, right, in these little holes, right, inside of the crystalline matrix. And it's happened at 100% of their experiments, right? They pulled in air from outside, like in a big city, right? They got plenty of CO2 in that big city, and they came back with 90% of the CO2 was gone from just regular air out their window going through using this filter, which is when you look at it, it's like a yellow powder. Like I said, it's usually you have those slab filters, but the crystalline structure is apparently extraordinarily difficult to try to get to sort of honeycomb together in any kind of framework like that. So you end up basically with a bunch of little pieces that have that filtery effect, right? So it ends up looking like a powder, and this is like a yellow powder. But it's still, again, it's not something that you have to put in a wall and have something pass through. This actually basically pulls the CO2 out of the air by trapping it in this substance, which can then be taken somewhere and something can be done with the CO2. It still has to, we still have to do something with it, but it's not in the air anymore, right? So if they happen to, and I don't know what the effect of this compound would be if somehow we were to say aerosolize it, right, to an extent of dropping it out of an airplane and just trapping all the CO2 out of the sky, and it's just all over the ground, what happens? Does it just dissolve and go back in the air? Do we have to have a special cleaning apparatus? Is it even biodegradable? None of these are questions that we got answers to. But this would be something to ask, right? So, that's a good thing, right? This good news on the front of climate change. And I think a little overzealously, his professor said, you just, solve the crisis of the 21st century or whatever, which I don't think so. There's a lot more to this that goes from great idea and invention to you've now solved climate change. But it's definitely a step in the right direction, right? This is great. To boil it all down, it's taking sort of something that's already complex, right? Like these organic structures, which organic structures are extremely complex structures, right? That's why a lot of things are that's made in nature, and you don't just get a synthetic version. You can have a synthetic version that's maybe, as they'll say, therapeutically the same or formulaically the same, but it isn't necessarily atomically the same, right? So it's different. There's going to be some differences in there. Replicating things as complex as a protein, even though they have a supercomputer now that's doing a really good job of predicting protein design and function, right? But it is a very complicated thing. So to take something like that and then to sort of re-engineer it synthetically to create these sort of polymers, this is what we're hoping to do here, and this is one of the things that they're doing to make it do the carbon pulling. Okay, it's definitely raining, so we're gonna call it a quits here. And I'll get you guys in the next episode, I guess. So, will we survive our own apocalypse? Only time will tell.